Welcome to the Living Fullness podcast, where we talk all things life, virtue, and relationships. My name is Stina Constantine.
And my name is Father Sean Burns. And each month we welcome a guest on the show who will share one aspect of their Christian life that they've found helps them to live life to the full. Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Living Fullness. As you know, once a month we have a special guest on to interview them and to talk to them about some particular topic that's close to their heart. And this month we have a very special guest from the States. Stina, would you like to introduce our guest?
Yes, I would love to. So today on the podcast, we have Bobby Angel. He is a native Florida man. He's worked for 8 years as a campus minister and a teacher at an all-boys school. He enjoys writing and holds a Master of Theology from the Augustine Institute. He's also the husband of Jackie Francois Angel, and together they've just celebrated 10 years of marriage. They've just had their 10th wedding anniversary. They're co-hosts of their own podcast as well called Conversations with Jackie and Bobby, and they're expecting their 5th child this year. So welcome, Bobby Angel.
Yeah, great to be here with you all. I'm excited.
Thank you, and congratulations. Congratulations on two fronts. First of all, your 10th wedding anniversary, and also child number 5 on the way. It's beautiful.
Yeah, we made it. We haven't killed each other yet. Marriage has been easy, honestly. Like, marriage has been a beautiful gift when you discern well. It's your best friend by God's grace, but parenthood has stretched me. We're going to talk about seminary formation in this episode, and I could have been a very happy, quiet, like Trappist that just doesn't talk, but the Lord called me to parenthood and a lot of agony and graces, and I tell young men, like, fatherhood is the most exhausting and beautiful thing the Lord will ever call you to.
Yeah.
And that goes for biological or spiritual.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. 100%.
So we can end the episode there.
That's yeah. Look, I mean, nothing really needs to be said more.
I've dropped my wisdom.
You've dropped your wisdom, and that's yeah. Look, Bobby, would you be able to start just by giving us a short overview of you know, who you are, and what's led you to now being a husband of 10 years and a father of 5?
Yeah. So in the beginning, no. So we won't start that far back. I am a Florida native and was born and raised in the Catholic faith and didn't think it was anything super dynamic. I thought it was just a nice moral code, and we checked in on Sundays. And it wasn't until late in high school I really had a conversion. I really had to wake up to the faith through a different parish that had a really dynamic youth group and was all in. It was like one of those things I can't unsee. Like, I couldn't unsee, like, the fact that the Lord is real, God is real, and he's calling me by name to know him. And so college and university was like all in. All right, I'm going to ask all the hard questions and figure out what the Lord's calling me to, what the church really teaches, what it's about. And in the college years was the first time I seriously considered the priesthood. And I wanted to date and be normal and do all of those things. And so it was kind of this weird, like, attraction to the priesthood that I'd never experienced before. Like a respect for the priesthood, sure, but not like a serious option for my life. And it was like a beckoning that wouldn't go away. And I tried dating. I tried running away for a while. Actually became a firefighter for a brief period after university, and then relented. Said, I'm going to be an old man and wonder what if I don't go and check out this priesthood thing. And so the Diocese of St. Petersburg, Tampa, accepted me. And 3 years in formation, so 2 years in the minor, 1 year in the major, before I discerned, I think I am called to marriage, and I prayed for a sign that was loud and blonde. And the Lord And the Lord brought me to my wife, who we were friends already. And it just was very clear. After most of my 20s, it felt like pounding my head against the wall and treating God like a magic 8-ball. Like, just tell me what you want. And treating it like my vocation like a problem to be solved. You know, rather than like the Kierkegaard, like, no, it's a mystery to be lived and embraced. When the time was right, and I finally kind of like just let go, just received, the Lord was like, all right, now you're finally ready. Like, there's my wife. And chased her across the country like any rational man would. And we did a novena to St. Joseph. And on the 9th day, this job at this all-boys school opened up. And somehow the random Florida guy got it in the door. And so was blessed to work at this great school for almost 10 years. Now we're living in Texas and doing full-time traveling, speaking, writing. Been blessed to do videos with Ascension Press for a number of years now. And I'm also again, the Lord just kind of keeps surprising me with twists and turns, but stuff that makes sense from his heavenly place. I'm working with Catholic Psych, the Catholic Psych Institute right now, as a student mentor, which really has been so beautiful and so out of left field, but really just combines my love of ministry and accompaniment and walking with people. So I'm getting trained in that, which, again, I can see, like, from my own years of formation, the Lord wastes nothing. So even looking at 3 years, and man, like, I have genuinely not struggled with did I waste 3 years in, like, considering the priesthood? Like that has never seriously crossed my mind, because my years were such a time of prayer and meeting solid dudes, like guys who are some of my closest friends to this day, a time of really getting over my ego and how I wanted life to be. And that wasn't always pleasant, you know, being called to the carpet by formators and deans of men and just having the hard conversations. They made me go to therapy my second year of formation. I didn't want to do it. And I didn't tell a soul during that time. Because it's just, as a guy, it's like, I don't want to admit I need help, or there's something wrong with me, or there's...
Yeah.
But, I mean, the Lord just really worked through those years. I am such a better husband and father and man because of those years of priestly discernment and surrendering myself to the process and saying, Lord, I have no idea where you're leading me, but I'm in. I'll follow.
And that's when you know you've actually got a good... a good formative program. I mean, no formative program is perfect, but you've got a good formative program when you can leave a seminary, look back and go, do you know what? That wasn't a waste of time in any way, shape, or form. I'm a better man for having gone through those 3 years of formation, because I've come out changed. I've come out in some way closer to the Lord. I've come out, with a deeper understanding of who I am, with all my strengths and weaknesses, and who God's called me to be. That's really awesome.
And I want to say too, like it's every guy's story is so unique, and the seminaries, these schools where men are trained and schooled and formed to be priests, they're so different around the world. Like, some are healthy, some aren't. Some have great priest professors and formators, and some maybe not. And so when I see young guys, you know, like I was, like, struggling, like they're fighting God, they're fighting it, but they're kind of attracted to the priesthood. They're like, it's hard for me to give a blank, like, no, absolutely go. It's more like, well, it depends. It depends how serious the call is. Like, is it just kind of like comes and goes? Is it a respect for the priesthood, or is it a true, like, Jesus is knocking and won't leave you alone? And that's what it was for me.
Yeah.
And then, like, where's your heart pulling you? Like, diocesan or a religious order like the Franciscans or the Dominicans or the Benedictines, or, you know, on and on. Like, so there's those kind of things to discern too. Like, where exactly might God be calling you? But then what's been beautiful, I think, is this emergence of the propedeutic year.
Yes.
Which I think would have benefited me a lot. That instead of just like coming off the street if you're working or you're coming out of school straight into the rigor of like, here's a full academic program, whether or not you've ever read a philosophy book, period, like here you go, here's like 20 credits, and living in a community with other dudes, and this like rhythm of prayer, like it's a lot to just jump in. And you're coming in, and I can speak from experience, you're coming in with all your wounds.
Yeah.
You're coming in with all your stuff. Like you may not even know the story of salvation history. Like you don't need to know the Bible back, like front and back, but do you know the big beats of the Bible? Like, do you know our faith? Like, are you a disciple? And I think to ask guys to take a year or two at the start and say, you're going to live in community before we give you a full academic year. The church has rolled out, I think in the last couple of years, they've announced this.
The propedeutic year has been announced about 20 years ago. And we've had it here in Australia for the last 20 years. In 1992, by Pope John Paul II in Pastores Dabo Vobis, he explained that a propedeutic year was necessary for seminarians. And it's something that my understanding of the United States situation is that it was something which was seen as an added burden. That it was a burden because the training was already so long.
Right.
You're then going to add an extra year onto this thing. And so it never quite grew legs in the States.
Got it.
And because my understanding is that it's only really starting to grow legs in the last few years in the States. Is that about the situation?
Yeah. So there's my own like limited understanding of like worldwide, like JP2 like announced it. Like I think just because I'm finally seeing bishops in the States take this seriously, that you're taking guys off the street and drop them in like the deep end of the pool to have a year where you're living in community and you're taking those steps of human formation, which are so key, like the spiritual, the intellectual, the pastoral, they build on the human. So let's make you a healthy human being first. Let's just kind of live in community, get the rhythm of prayer down. Then you kind of see like, okay, am I really called to this? That's so healthy. And so from the state side, there's a few dioceses that are doing that. And I'm happy to see that more taking that seriously. I think especially because our generation, we're carrying so much baggage and we're not discipled at such a large like rate. Like some guys take the study of the faith on themselves, like they've personally invested, but a lot of guys haven't. And so to jump right in the deep end and say, am I called to be a priest? It's like, well, hold up. Like, who are you and what are you bringing to the table first? And let's sort that out. Yeah. Like, let's make you into a good man. And then let's make you into a good and healthy priest.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an important order. This is a really interesting thing to me. The states typically, from what I can see, admittedly, I'm on the other side of the world, so who knows? But the states, from what I can see, is normally pretty far ahead of the game in terms of human formation. At least it's been ahead of where Australia's been at normally. So we nominally adopted what was called a propedeutic year about 20 years ago, maybe a bit more than that. It might be 25 years ago. But I do mean nominally adopted. So the adoption was there because, well, Pope John Paul II said we had to have it. And so let's have a propedeutic year. But what it became was another year of academics. It became another year where stuff just happened. And for us, it's only been in the last few years that we've gone, oh, hang on a second. We've actually got this brilliant thing called a propedeutic year, which we can keep out of the academic program and which we can help men to develop the human qualities necessary for grace to build upon. So that's I think the phenomenon of the propedeutic year being adopted is worldwide. It's just that some places have adopted it nominally and others haven't.
Yeah, no, that's probably true. So it is a blessing to see that more parts of the states that I think just neglected it straight out are finally taking it seriously. Because I can point to some dioceses where they do have formation houses where over the summers the guys live together,
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of an extension of that. Like you live together and maybe you go out for external ministries all over the place, but you are learning to live in a common space for the human formation piece to really develop and flourish. And I know there's parts where they're offering like counseling. Like you have to go to see the counselor like once a week, whether or not you really have visible baggage or emotional wounds. Like, and if that does come to light, we can get that addressed and named and talked out before, again, the intensity of full academic workload begins. And then, because then you can just run the risk of that stays under the radar. And I don't ever really deal with that stuff. I just kind of figure out how to cope with it. Like I've been coping with it for the last who knows how many years. And then somehow maybe you make it to ordination and you haven't ever dealt with the deep stuff you've been carrying. So like it will all come to light one way or another. And so for me, it was kicking and screaming, but I knew like, I've got to like get what I'm carrying out into the light. And knowing that like, if I'm called to whatever fatherhood, spiritual or biological, like I want to be free.
Yeah.
Like, I want to be free as I can be to say yes to this.
So you've had the experience of being in the seminary for a few years and then leaving the seminary to marry your beautiful wife. And I guess, could you, just as a starting point, could you run us through, if you're comfortable, could you run us through what that discernment looked like for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it took a lot to enter the seminary, like leaving a job and the known and the stability, and it was scary to leave. The second year was a year of a lot of desolation. Like there was just a lot of not hearing the Lord, feeling, because seminary it's kind of a bubble.
Oh yeah,
and so it can carry its own like just kind of, I don't know, culture, its own gossip, its own like just strange way of being. And sometimes you carry the cross of misunderstanding. Like your peers or the formators, they put you in a box of like, and that's not who you are, but like you also kind of learn like perceptions matter. Like, so how do you carry yourself? Because that is, again, reflecting like, if I look to myself as a priest, I don't want to cause scandal. And so how am I behaving on the weekends? Like, how am I behaving with my brothers? And your heart may be pure, but, people can only see the outside. So I had to have some like hard internal conversations with myself because I was fresh out of like, again, university and fire department. So there was a lot of deformation that happened in those years. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
Okay.
That I had to take seriously in like a relationship with alcohol or, rooting pornography out of my life, which I'm part of the walking wounded there. That hit me when I was like 11-ish or so. But again, by the grace of God, those years are when I really took the battle seriously. I was like, I need this out of my life, and was blessed with brothers who accompanied me, and some still to this day. And so, my third year, I feel like I really just started to take like this question of marriage seriously. And I think out of like 2 years of some purification, the third year kind of paved the way for some real like healing and regrounding. And with a really great spiritual director I had to look at like, okay, knowing how I'm built, knowing that I've checked out like 9 or 10 books on celibacy from the library, and I can't like, I'm not academically wrapping my head around it. Like it's a beautiful discipline. I absolutely do not think the Western church should get rid of it, but it was more like how I'm made, knowing my heart, like, Lord, I really think you have built me in a way that I am called to earthly marriage. And you can talk to any of my classmates and they say like, listen, like he's very honest about this. Like he's like, some guys try to like just pretend they're asexual or try to like, yeah, but like they just try to like downplay that human beautiful part of our desires. And I was very like, I don't know, I don't know.
Yeah.
I also know, but I have classmates again that they just settled in and they knew like second, third year, they were like, I'm called to this.
Yeah.
And I was still on the fence. I was still like, I could go either way and I don't know. And I just am feeling more at peace with the married vocation. And so my third year, I think certainly by middle of the year, I realized I think I need to leave. I think I'm called out. I absolutely believe the Lord called me in. And I think there's also this mystery of like, he's calling me out, and that's scary. Because I saw guys too, like they stayed for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
You know, because you don't want to let people down. Like your parishioners start looking at you like Father so-and-so already.
Yeah.
And so sometimes there's peer pressure to stay. Sometimes there's just the fear of coming back to, you know, the lay life. And so we had some really good classmates, like just stand-up dudes, like who discerned out. And it always kind of shook the household. It was like, but at the same time, if a guy's being transparent and honest and just like, here's what I'm called to, like you had to rejoice for the guy. Yeah. And it always raised the question, why do I stay? And so for me, it really came to that point. And so as I'm discerning out, I re-meet my friend Jackie at a theology of the body conference, like it was a beautiful setting, which is where we first became friends. And the second time we met, it was like the scales fell from my eyes and was like, holy cow, that's my wife. And there was a peace that was there that I had not had in 3 years of formation. And even the years prior of college discernment and wrestling, it just was kind of like, now you're ready. And so thankfully it was mutual. Like it wasn't just one-sided crushy crush.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. And then, you know, the Lord can move pretty quickly when it's time, when it's ready. And so I moved, again, like I said, I moved to California and we dated for 3 months-ish. Though we knew at that point we were both like mid to late 20s, and we just kind of like, we know we're just gonna wait to not freak people out. And then 3 months of proper dating, and then proposed, and then 9 months later we got married. So that's my story. And now I know, though, there's also the guys that they leave very abruptly. There's guys that are more running away than embracing something proper. And again, everyone's got a different story. One of my favorite priests growing up, he left the seminary twice. So every guy's got a different story here. But I just can see, like, when you surrender, when you lay down the fear, God will make his will known. And it's not necessarily our timetable, it's his.
Yeah.
But yeah, let me stop there. Yeah.
I guess that sort of makes the question hard to answer, because the observation that I've made that we've spoken about before we started recording, it's a repeated pattern that I've seen, other people have seen, not just from, you know, my own diocese, from other dioceses. And it's this repeated pattern of young men who are leaving the seminary, and within weeks of having left the seminary, they're in a relationship. And then within weeks or months of having entered a relationship, they're engaged and married. Like, it happens so fast. And for some of them, perhaps, you know, that was perfect timing, really good, sensible discernment. But for others, there's a question mark of, was this rushed? Because it was so, they rushed in, they rushed out, they rushed into a relationship, rushed through marriage. Like, is there no space where time is essential in discernment? And it just kind of made me go, is there something missing, or could potentially be missing in that discernment space, where if time is not given enough room to pass? And it's also that what you're talking about before too, it's that intentionality of why you're there too, not running away from or trying to run towards something out of fear or out of obligation or peer pressure, but actually genuinely wanting to be there because you feel called to be there, and wrestling in that space too.
Oh yeah, and I wrestled, but I also can tell you I've seen that too. Like guys that leave very abruptly, and it's kind of like, okay, where did that come from? And then end up in a relationship very quickly after, and it's like, probably needed a little more space, a little more time to let the ground settle. And for some of that, like maybe marriage is the idol that like this will satisfy me. And God can work with all the twists and turns we give him for sure. But you always want to discern something in peace and not anxiety. You don't want to be, again, running away from something and just run headlong into something thinking it will fix the thing, when it's like you're carrying the baggage from one thing to the other. If again, and I think that's too, like we have to have the humility to listen to the people around us. And that's tough. And I think seminary like gave me that. I didn't ask for it, but like you're being evaluated every year, which always, isn't always pleasant, because it's again that perception of like, here's what we're seeing. Because it's not just you saying, listen, I would be an awesome priest. It's like, listen, kid, like the church is also discerning you.
Yeah.
Like you think you're God's gift. Yes, you are. You're created in the image and likeness of God. You have infinite value, of course. But in terms of being our priest, you've got some work to do. And so that's not always pleasant. And to the extent we humble ourselves and are willing to hear feedback, but to the extent we're able to hear from friends, hey, are you okay? Like, what's going on? Are you happy? Like, this is kind of rushed. This is kind of fast. Like, to the extent we're willing to hear that and hear the wisdom from others, parents, friends, colleagues, people who love and care for us, will be better for it. To the extent we push those voices of accountability away.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to hear it. I want to do my own thing. It's like, well, okay. And God respects our free will, and he'll let us go, even if it's not the most thought out decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess something you were saying before too about, how it shook the community when someone would leave. And there's that aspect too. There's relationships that are formed in that community that when you leave and leave so abruptly and then abruptly enter into another relationship, there's potential there to hurt as well, because there's already a group of people who are now having to sort of restructure, rejig, re-find their balance without you, and then saying, oh, there's no settling for that person either. They've just run straight into something else.
And I mean, what you just said, Stina, is so good, because there is this like band of brothers kind of aspect of like trust we have all built up. You come from all walks of life, athletic, not athletic, business-minded, no business sense, like this strange cadre of guys living together. And that when one leaves, like, yeah, there is this like, oh man, especially if he's like a good solid dude. Now, again, if he's being transparent, if he's vocal, if he's like if he's being honest with his spiritual director, there's transparency. It sucks in the short term, but there's like, you're happy for the guy. You're like, good, go make babies, do whatever the Lord wants you to do. But it is like when the abruptness happens, and then all of a sudden he's in a relationship really quickly. It's kind of like you feel, there's like a trust that's been broken, or like the relationship part is so key. Yeah.
There's sort of two things that stick out in my mind. Like if a guy's in the seminary for 6 months or something, and looks at it and goes, okay, I gave this a go because I thought I needed to give it a go. I've given it a go for 6 months, and I've looked at it and gone, God definitely does not want me here. Like this is, I'm not at peace about it. I'm not wanting to be here. I know this isn't where God wants me. I feel a lot of peace in regard to married life. I think this is something that I should leave. Like, even if he lasts a proper Judic year, a full first year, good on him. He's given it a good shot. And if he goes and then if he finds himself in a relationship, time isn't so much an issue for me as a bigger question around motivation. Motivation will help in determining the appropriate course of action. Like, am I leaving the seminary because I actually feel like God is calling me to go and be married? Or am I leaving the seminary because something just got revealed to me about myself and I've got to work on some stuff and I'm not prepared to work on that stuff? I'm out of here. But getting out of the institution is a little bit scary. So I'm looking for a new direction in life. Here's a possible direction. Here's someone who's looking for a husband, and I'm now looking for a wife. Hey, so it's sort of, it's there. Fear is guiding the decision-making process. And while fear is governing the decision-making process, the decisions are always going to seem very ill-timed. They're always going to have a jarring aspect to them. They're not going to flow well, because the Holy Spirit isn't the one who's kind of running the motor, so to speak. If a guy's like, actually, yeah, I've come to the end of this proper Judic year, and I'm really at peace with the fact that God does not want me here. I'm ready to go and look at look at where God wants me next, looking at what this next stage of my life is going to look like in all of its scariness that sort of entails. Right. Well, that's a whole different kettle of fish. Whatever happens from there, you've got a man who's mature enough to recognize that this is not where God wants me. He wants me somewhere else. And you can be open to whatever possibilities come your way. So time doesn't concern me as much as motivation. Like, I wouldn't want to stick a time limit and say, you must wait X amount of time before you go and do the next thing, or before you, like, that would be, I think, a problematic approach. But to have to look at what is it that's motivating me to make this next step, whatever it is, to stay in the seminary or to leave the seminary, to get married or to pursue someone's heart, or to take a step back, whatever it might be. What is it that's actually motivating that? What sits behind that? Is it fear? Is it fear of the unknown? Is it fear of leaving the institution? Fear of not having a direction? Or is it a genuinely peace-filled adventure that the Lord has placed in front of us that calls us to step out and trust? So motivation for me is yeah.
I guess perhaps time's not the right way. More the rush as opposed to the time. If there's a rush behind the decisions that are being made, as opposed to how much time is lapsed or has lapsed or should lapse before, X, Y decision is made, are you rushing out of the seminary? Are you rushing into something else? That is probably a better way of phrasing it than time.
Actually, I think you did use that word, rush. There. Yeah. No, fair.
Yeah, and that too is where, like, again, every guy's story is so different in terms of age they entered, like the maturity there, the stories, the wounds. And I saw all stripes and sizes in such a beautiful way in my limited time. I have such a heart for seminarians because I know it's a lot. It's a lot that the Lord has thrown at these guys. A lot of spiritual warfare, a lot of just pressure from, like I said, sometimes the parish community, sometimes from themselves. And it's such a journey from start to finish. And it used to be, at least like in the States, more of you were seen as a failure if you didn't make it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Which is, I don't see much anymore. I think most people are oblivious to like seminaries, like the process at all. They just think the problem is they automatically think you're father so-and-so. It's less about like failing. It's just, I think people that know have a more compassionate understanding of the process. And some guys acclimate back to lay life very easily. Some guys struggle. You go from living in a household of other guys, all walk in the same direction, same rhythm of prayer, to kind of like back to being a lone ranger in a way. It's like, well, good luck. So some guys, that's a big struggle. But kind of what you guys were mentioning too, like it's so hard to know from the outside, and this is where it really is up to like the man and the Lord. Are you letting peace drive the bus, or are you letting fear and anxiety? And for me, it was almost, I had to like stop from second guessing myself, because the doors were just kind of flying open of like, here's your wife, here's a job. It was all happening very easily.
Yeah.
And I almost had to be like, no, it's happening too fast. It shouldn't take, this should. And it was like, don't refuse the gift.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, that was like, so for my own wounds, it was kind of like, you don't deserve this. Like, no, this is, the Lord is too, like, he's being too generous. He's being too good. Yeah. And it's like, no, receive the gift.
So real.
My spiritual director was like, listen, there's not enough love in the world. If he's called you to this, you fill it up. Like, you fill it up with love. I'm like, and I had a friend, I had a friend ask me in a couple of months after I left formation. She asked me, do you think you confuse the call to holiness with the call to holy orders? Because we're all called to holiness, male, female, married, unmarried, religious, priest, etc. Like, we're all called to integration, holiness, to be disciples of the Lord. And I had never thought of it in that dimension before. And I thought about it for a couple minutes before I responded, because it really threw me for a loop. But I honestly said, I know. Like, I believe and I know the Lord called me to seminary formation for a reason. However, I did meet guys along the way and have met guys in the years since who think, and girls too, who think like, in order to be holy, I have to be a priest. In order to be holy, I have to be a nun. And, I like to poke and be like, why? Like, why is that so? Like, why do you think that? And, because I'll tell you, like, man, I think for the majority of humanity, we are called to marriage and parenthood, because this is the thing that will crucify our egos. Like, this in a real way will get us over ourselves. The beauty of children is like, it's not about me anymore. I love my little.
And there could be so many.
Yeah.
I
love their.
I've heard you describe them like that.
Yeah. They are great. They are a hoot. But that, like, no matter what, you're called to be holy. So it's like, Lord, where do you want me? Like, where do I fit? Like, help me to cooperate with that, because there's also the, like, Lord, this is this is the box that I wanted my life to be in. Take it. Like, you have permission to destroy it, blow it up, and make it something better than I ever could imagine.
Yeah.
This is, rightly said, Stina, 100%, because the almost the sort of precondition of setting upon the journey of discovering, Lord, how do you want me to live out holiness, is recognizing that each and every one of us are actually called to be saints. We're all called to be holy. We're not called to be holy in the same way. And I've had students say to me, Father, I want to be a saint. I'm like, well, I'd settle for you getting your assessments in on time. Like that's, it's you want to be a saint. That's awesome. But let's start with the most practical thing that you can, which is get stuff in on time. Like that's the start of sanctity, is doing what you're meant to be doing at the time you're meant to be doing it for the right motivations and doing it well. So let's work on that. And then we might be able to work further towards the idea of saintliness and sanctity. But everyone at every single moment of our lives is called to sanctity, called to holiness. Like, there's never a point where it's like the call to holiness kicks in. It's already kicked in. It kicked in at the moment of conception. It kicked in. Like it's there. So yeah. No, I very much love that. That's 100%.
And I was even thinking before, there's just so much hurt as well in the world that who knows, there could be so many different reasons, so many different motivators that underlie this belief of religious life is the only way to be holy. If that's the belief that someone holds, there's so many things that can sit under that, from overinflating what the religious life looks like or could look like and what it must feel like, that it might be an easier path somehow, or not looking at marriage as beautiful, not because the world is so wounded. We have so many separated and broken families and homes. It's hard to find families that are together and thriving and, doing the grind, like hard battle stuff, but also thriving in their lives. It's hard to find those. So there could be so many different motivators that underlie that belief system that stops a person from really embracing what God's calling each and every person to.
Bobby, you mentioned something before which is worthwhile just investigating for a little bit, which is you've seen a host of blokes go in and go out for a multitude and a variety of reasons. There is a strong tendency to go in both married life and also going into the seminary, that both of those are sometimes viewed as a shelter to escape. So it's a place where, oh gosh, I have these serious problems. And maybe the serious problem is, one that constantly rears its head today, pornography. Well, okay, I'm if I go to the seminary, I'm sure that'll solve the problem, or I'll escape from the problem there. Or if I get married, that'll solve the problem. It's like, no, neither of those avenues is going to solve this problem. What needs to be spoken into our present Christian culture to help both young men and young women see that a vocation is not a place to flee. It's not a place to flee from something.
Yeah, we could do another hour on this one.
Sorry, man.
No, Stina, you want to take this one? This is, I mean, just like kind of what we said about like running to versus running from. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, like walking with a young guy now who had a very hurt witness of marriage, like child of divorce and like verbal abuse and all this stuff. So his idea of marriage is very, and admittedly, he knows like it's skewed and it's broken. So for him, like, he's worried, and we've kind of unearthed this, is he's worried of passing that trauma on to his children if he's called to marriage. So for him, he looks at the priesthood as like, let me run away to this option. And so we're kind of rehabbing his idea of marriage again, looking at beautiful marriages and families around him and say, you do not need to repeat the cycle of the past. You can have a radically different marriage than that of your parents while honoring them and loving them, seeing the brokenness. That's part of all of our stories. And even like, some seminarians I walked with who you could tell like they were either here because of family expectations, not necessarily they felt free. I think freedom is the big thing. Like, were you free to enter? Are you free to leave? Or what might you be shackling you in the dark? What might be shackling you mentally, like psychologically, that that for me was kind of like part of the therapy in my second year, was like stuff I didn't know I was still carrying from college that we were able to unearth and examine and look at, and has led me to being a freer man today. There's another story too that just fled my mind, because I'm a tired dad. I'm a tired dad, and it's happening more and more.
Oh.
So let me take a dramatic sip of coffee, and you guys can fill the silence.
No, we're just going to sit with the silence and make it incredibly awkward.
You can small group me. Just small group me and nod on this podcast.
Oh my gosh.
It's not coming. Brilliant. It's not coming.
That's okay. It may or may not show up in the Patreon section after this, so we'll just
good teaser.
Don't push it. Don't push it. I guess to try and wrap up, though, one of the things you said at the very beginning, which I think would be really, really helpful for any young man who has ever had that fleeting thought of possibility of the seminary, something you identified very early on was that there was this nagging, like, Jesus kept knocking. He kept coming at you. He wasn't going to let up. And it was this question of, well, if I don't go there, then I'll never know. But that takes bravery, though. That takes courage to be able to do. And I'm certainly finding, and have found for years with the men that I speak with who are umming and ahhing, they have a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear about whether to even try for the seminary, to just give it a go. So is there something you would say to those young men who are sitting there thinking, I've had this thought, I'm trying to push away the thought, I don't want to entertain that thought? Like, is there anything, any word of encouragement, anything that you can give?
Jesus wins in the end.
Love it.
You can run as fast as you can. He's the hound of heaven. And so, I mean, I had firefighters because I had a job, like I was working, and like this thing I had shoved down since early in university was like flooding back to me. And I realized I'm going to be an old man and wonder what if. And I had firefighter colleagues be like, dude, just work 20 years, like get your pension and then go off and do this priest thing. And I just was like, no, like I got to give my youth to the Lord. Like not my tired, leftovers. Now I am tired, and I feel like it's like, I'm so glad I gave the Lord my best years. And as I said, they were absolutely not a waste. I'm a better man because of saying yes to that. And so there also is like just the baby steps of like, okay, this is more than just kind of a passing, maybe not. This is knocking. This is something to look at. The Lord's asking me to look at it, making time for silence and prayer. And then it's like dating. Like you don't go to asking the girl out to marriage. Usually it's the baby steps of like, you ask her on a date, you ask her on a second date, and etc. And so you talk to a priest. What's it like being a priest? How did you know? You talk to a vocation director. You do a come and see where you visit a seminary or religious house. I visited the Dominicans in St. Louis, and because that was the only order I seriously considered. And very joyful guys, very much gelled with the charism, but I just had a peace with the diocesan life. So I checked out a few options, and just where the Lord was giving me peace, I just kept following. So for any guy out there, be not afraid. To echo John Paul II, be not afraid. And Pope Benedict even said, I think in one of his first papal messages or his homily, he said, the Lord takes nothing away and gives you everything back. Like, be not afraid of Christ. The Lord takes away nothing, but gives you everything.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And
for the Patreon community, I did remember the story, so you guys can
rock
Excellent.
on.
We'll come back to that
That's
one.
Marvelous. Look, my role here in the Wagga Wagga diocese, like most priests, I suppose, I have about 7 different hats, but and do none of them particularly well. But the one of the hats I'm wearing is vocations director for the Wagga Wagga diocese. And for our American friends, if you're wondering what the heck did he just say, Wagga Wagga what, where now? It's a little diocese between Sydney and Melbourne. For young men in the Wagga diocese, if you're hearing these words, I can't help but echo exactly what Bobby has said. That don't be afraid, and in the end, there's nothing really to be afraid of. The only thing is one cannot discern in a vacuum. One must always discern concretely by making concrete decisions and choices. So if you're thinking that there's a vocation there and it's more than just a fleeting thought, give it a whirl. And that's my promo done.
Go and talk to the vocations director.
Right.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for giving us your time, Bobby. We really appreciate you coming on here with, being able to open up seminary formation conversation, seminary discernment conversation with us. So thank you.
Yeah, it's been a blast. Thank you guys for the invite.
As we always do with our guest interviews, we do have a rapid fire number of questions that we're going to just kind of throw at you. They come from Left Wing. They're completely, off the books. So, Padre and I haven't even talked about this. Like, we're just kind of going to throw it and see what happens. So just the first thing that comes to mind for you.
All right. So first off, tea or coffee?
Coffee all day.
Yeah. Good man.
All day. And all night by the looks of it too.
And all night in my time zone. Still drinking it.
Okay, question 2. If you could speak to any author for 5 minutes who's now dead, who would it be and what would you ask?
Oh, there's too many. Who is dead?
Who is dead?
I would go with Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He was a survivor of Auschwitz.
Yeah.
Austrian Jewish therapist, psychiatrist. Like, just his story. It is so logos centered, which is like the therapy he developed, and just so like dripping with Catholic understanding of suffering, and free. Like, you don't choose your circumstances, but you choose how you respond to them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. What is the coolest or strangest thing that has ever happened to you?
What comes to mind is I went surfing in Ireland, and it was very, 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 very cold.
Yeah, right.
I mean, the wetsuit was like blubber, and I was worried about sharks, and they're like, "No sharks up here, mate."
Just freeze.
Yeah, I'm like, well, everywhere else there's sharks.
Yep. Oh dear.
Okay, question 4. If your wife and children had to use one word each to describe you, what words would they pick?
One word each. My wife would say rugged.
Nice.
My children would say stinky.
Fantastic.
I don't think I am, but
good. No.
Just their way to keep me in check.
Nice. Yeah.
Nice. Finally, what is one secret talent you have that most people don't know about, or one that you wish you had?
I wish I could sing. I know I can sing, but it's a self-confidence thing. I am happy to just stand back and do the rain stick or the cowbell. I draw. It's been a number of years, though.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I was always doodling.
What kind
in
of
class.
medium?
Like pencil, just like black and white. It kind of dropped off when I got into college, but it comes out here and there. There's just deeply ingrained muscle memory that I'll just start drawing a dinosaur with my kids, or Yoshi from Mario.
Nice.
Yep.
And they're just like, where'd you learn that? And it's in the back of my brain that you're not allowed to access when you're an adult. Like, oh yeah, I can draw things.
Nice. That's really cool.
That's awesome. I love
Well, look, thank you so much for being with us, Bobby, and for sharing part of your life, part of your story with us, and opening up some of the questions around discernment. It's been wonderful having you on, wonderful having your insights.
Yeah, no, thank you guys again for having me. We'll be praying for you, your team, and all of your listeners. Thank you guys.
Good on you.
Thank you. Where can people find you, Bobby?
You can't.
You can't. Okay.
I'll
No
always
worries.
I'll
Nobody
always
can
be
find
one
Bobby.
step ahead. Always be one step ahead of you. You'll never find me. We have a website, JackieandBobby.com. I'm on Instagram, Bobby.angel. Yeah. And then for anyone who's really in the throes of discernment, shameless self-promotion here. We wrote a book, Pray, Decide, and Don't Worry. And all on vocation, discernment, and whether, I mean, it could be religious life. It could just be what college should I go to? What job should I do? Like any decision. We wrote it open-ended that way. We co-wrote it with Father Mike Smith with Essential Presents. So he shares his wisdom and testimony, and that is available on like ebook and audiobook if it's not physically in Australia. And it really is like the book I wish I had when I was 20, because it really is all this kind of discernment wisdom I learned from the school of life and seminary formation. And so we're proud of that one. That book is through Ascension Press.
Awesome. Yeah. Fantastic. I love the promotion.
Yeah. Super easy to read. I have read that one. It's on my bookshelf. Loved it.
It took a long time to write. And then people were like, oh, I read it in like 2 hours.
Yeah.
So happy for you.
You made it. That's how much work you put in. You made it so easy for us. The
Thanks.
amount of hours you put in.
Thank you for that.
Made it easy for us. Bless. Well, thank you again, Bobby, for being on the show with us. And thank you for watching or listening wherever you might be watching or listening from, whether you're on YouTube or in your car or in your home. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you are one of our Patreon supporters, jump over to Patreon and check out the behind the scenes conversation that we're about to have with Bobby, where he's going to share that story that he remembered. So jump over there. And if you're not a Patreon supporter, please do consider joining one of the tiers that you can afford in supporting this ministry. But as always, we will catch you next time. But until then, know our love and prayers.
God bless. If you enjoyed having our guest on the show as much as we did, please consider jumping over to Patreon and supporting the podcast.
Your donation will help cover the costs of this podcast and give you access to some behind-the-scenes content with our guests to give you an even deeper insight into how they live a Christ-like life.